The SOS signal flickered into the night sky like a dying heartbeat, carried on static and desperation. For hours, the SEAL team had been pinned down, surrounded by an enemy force that outnumbered and outgunned them. Their calls for help cut into silence, swallowed by an indifferent sky. Each unanswered plea was a nail hammered into their resolve, each passing second another thread unraveling in the fabric of hope. The men exchanged looks that needed no words, looks of quiet calculation, of grim acceptance, of the bitter knowledge that no one was coming, until the silence cracked. Far beyond the jungle canopy, unseen to the men gasping for air and bleeding into the mud, a lone sniper lay still as stone. Her eyes traced the horizon, unblinking, unshaken, waiting for the storm she knew was already breaking. She had been listening, not to the radio but to the silence that followed. In war, silence was never empty. It was either death or the pause before it. She chose not to wait for confirmation. Her name was Area Vale, though among those who had fought beside her, she was never called by name. To them, she was simply the Avenger. Scars laced her forearms like burned constellations. Memories etched in flesh of battles where brothers had fallen and promises had been broken. She had lost too much to hesitation. Tonight she would not let silence bury another team. The jungle clung to her skin, damp with sweat and the metallic sting of humidity. Her rifle was steady, its barrel an extension of her own heartbeat. She breathed in the earth, the rot of leaves, the distant stench of gunpowder. Through her scope, she did not see soldiers. She saw predators circling the wounded, wolves howling for blood. They believed the SEAL were already forgotten, that no shadow lay watching them. She pressed the trigger, and the night answered. The first shot shattered a skull before the man's finger could curl around his trigger. The second tore through a throat, silencing a command mid-breath. Then silence again, only now the silence belonged to her. The hunters froze, uncertain, scanning the tree line that revealed nothing but darkness. For the SEAL, pinned behind broken stone and dwindling ammunition, confusion flickered into something else. Disbelief, then hope. Someone had heard them. Area never shifted. She was patient, methodical. Every exhale carried judgment. Every shot answered a question left screaming into the void. Her body remembered the rhythm of revenge. She did not fight for orders. She fought for the voices that had once gone unheard, for the men whose sauce had come too late, for the memory of a comrade who had bled out in her arms while headquarters delayed authorization. Her mind flicked back to him. Elias Kane, the man who had taught her the art of silence. He had been more than a mentor, more than a friend. He had been her anchor, the only one who understood why she stared so long into the horizon, even when no one was there. He had been killed 3 years earlier in a raid that command had abandoned when the risk grew too high. She had promised him, as his body cooled against her, that she would never let silence be the last word again. The enemy tried to rally. A squad broke from cover, shouting into the jungle, firing blind into shadows. She tracked their leader, the man with rage carved into his jaw, and ended him with a single shot that painted the leaves with his last breath. Panic rippled through the ranks, soldiers stumbling over one another, fear stripping them of the control they had owned only moments before. Through it all, Area said nothing. She did not call out to the SEAL, did not identify herself. Her silence was her power, her bullets, her voice. The men who survived that night would tell stories of an angel in the trees, a phantom who saved them without ever stepping into the light. The SEAL team, bloodied but unbroken, finally pushed back. Reinforcements had never been dispatched. No helicopters circled, no command had heard them. But in their darkest hour, one woman had listened to the silence and answered. When the last enemy fell, when the smoke of gunfire thinned and the cries of the wounded softened into the night, the men searched the tree line for her. They found nothing. Only a single cartridge lay in the mud, polished clean of blood and dirt, as if left deliberately. Later, when debriefed, the surviving officer would speak carefully, his voice tight with the weight of disbelief. He would say only this: someone out there carried justice in silence. Someone had turned the night into their battlefield, and because of that, a squad had come home. There was no medal, no official recognition. Command dismissed the account as hysteria under fire. But among the SEAL, the story spread. Around tables scarred with knives and memories, men leaned in close and whispered of the Avenger who had cut through the silence when no one else had answered. In her solitude, Arya knew she had not saved them for gratitude. She had saved them because silence was unbearable, because every unanswered SOS was a betrayal too heavy to bear. She had been taught once that honor was earned in the open, in parades and speeches. But she had learned that the truest honor was invisible, carried in shadows, delivered in silence. One of the SEAL would later write in his journal words that would never be published, never shared outside the tight circle of survivors. The world thinks heroes speak loudly, but the greatest of them never speak at all. That was the truth of Arya Vale. That was the legacy of the Avenger sniper. And so the story lingers, told not by headlines or history books, but by those who know what it feels like to scream into silence and be answered by a single shot in the night. It is a reminder whispered into the hearts of all who serve, that sometimes salvation comes not from orders or commands, but from the quiet strength of one who refuses to let silence be the final word. If you are hearing this story now, you are part of that remembrance. You are part of the silence that has been broken. Where are you watching from tonight? What would you have done if the cries of your brothers went unanswered? Share your thoughts. For it is in the telling that silence is defeated. And if you carry respect for the unseen battles, subscribe to hear more. Because the world is full of silent heroes whose stories deserve to be heard.